Good evening, and welcome to yet another Scale San Diego event. That's actually our fourth meetup. So how many of you know what SCALE stands for? All right, SCALE stands for Smart Cities Accelerator, Labs, and Environment. We created SCALE just a few months ago. In February, we had our very first event. And the whole goal of creating SCALE was to boost innovation community in San Diego focused on smart cities. We're primarily looking at two main things to get out of SCALE. First of all, is help companies that create something in smart city environment, help them grow and help them be successful and get funded and get necessary support and resources to be successful. And second is to look into big data that's coming out of the city opportunities and discover patterns, discover interesting new opportunities, discover ways to provide new services to fulfill different city needs. Now, when we talk about smart cities, we talk about a whole range of different applications. We talk about things that could be related to energy, sustainability, water, transportation, parking, and many other things that relate to our city. Smart buildings would be another example. And that's why we're really building a community of people with different backgrounds, engineers, entrepreneurs, business people, artists, designers, and so on and so on. So it's great to see everybody there. We have a pretty exciting program today. So the whole idea behind putting this event today is actually to talk a little bit in more detail what SCALE stands for. And what are we planning to accomplish? What the visions are? And to kick the discussion off, we invited Erik Caldwell, who runs the Economic Development Department of the City of San Diego, to talk about the key initiatives of the city and their engagement with startup in the city. Now, I just wanted to give you a quick run of what's coming. So Erik will come on stage in a minute to talk about key initiatives of the City of San Diego. And right after that, we're going to have Sarah Hernholm manage a panel. And the panel is going to be joined by my co-founder, Wolf Bielis, myself, and Greg Hoover, who's our CTO. And we're basically going to go in a lot of detail talking about what is that we're doing at SCALE, how do you become part of SCALE, what are the opportunities with the city, and where do we see our future. And that's where we very much expect you guys to get involved and ask questions and have these discussions. So now let me introduce Erik Caldwell. Erik is a native of Chicago, Illinois, who came to San Diego some time ago to come for college and stayed here. I wonder why. Erik graduated from SDSU, from an entrepreneurship program. And Erik's done both in his career. He's worked for the governments, but he's also been highly involved with startups and startup community. And now in his functions running the Economic Development Department, I don't know, have any of you guys been to our first event in February where we had Cody Hooven, Chief Sustainability Officer? So Cody is actually part of Erik's team. Is that correct? Yeah. All right. Please welcome Erik.
All right, so he called me out on not being a native San Diegan. How many of you are native San Diegans? A handful. That's about the appropriate amount. How many of you live in San Diego now? That's fantastic. Well, one more question. How many of you have been to a pizza place called Lefty's? Oh, we have some pizza connoisseurs here. Lefty's Pizzeria, Chicago-style pizza. Being from Chicago, I love Chicago-style pizza. Handful of you. Okay, so there's a few people in the room who understand what good pizza is really all about. And I want to start there in talking about smart cities. I'm going to start with the pizzeria, and trust me, I'm going to bring it all back. But, you know, as I'm sitting in Lefty's as the Economic Development Department or Director, I'm often thinking about other things than how amazing the pizza is. And I've known Lefty's, the pizzeria owners, since they opened up almost about 12, 13 years ago. And when I'm sitting in there with my business background and economic development background, I'm constantly thinking about how difficult it is to run a business in the city of San Diego. And I think sometimes I go back to my office, and one of those times I went back to my office and I actually asked myself, what would it take to actually open up a pizzeria in San Diego? If I wanted to recreate a Lefty's, let's just take the one on Goldfinch in Mission Hills. What would I have to do? And I actually went through that exercise. And this is the stack of rules, regulations, paperwork, and things that you have to read, understand, fill out, and return to the city in order to open up a pizzeria in the city of San Diego. And that's obviously not smart cities. That's what, 13th, 14th century technology. That's still the principal way, the printing press, that we use as government to communicate with our business community. And that creates a lot of frustration. It creates challenges for business owners. It creates challenges for us in government. And so when you start to think about things like this is typically how government approaches things. We're usually a little bit behind the curve, usually not several hundred years behind the curve, but usually behind the curve when it comes to technology deployment. How many of you have been to a website and the website for a government entity has asked you to download something, fill it out, and maybe if they're really technically savvy, email it back to them instead of mailing it? A handful of people have done this recently. Well, a lot of people in government still think that that's innovative. Or, paying for parking using a credit card instead of being able to just pay for it on your phone like the rest of the world does for everything else. So those are the challenges that we kind of face in thinking about smart cities and what isn't smart cities, is that when you think about what it really is, to me, the simple definition is taking something that is dumb, and that can be physical infrastructure in the real world. It could be a policy or a way that we're doing business at the city of San Diego, and bolting onto it and marrying up with it just the right amount of fresh technology, but with the purpose of improving our service delivery. At the end of the day, the city of San Diego is an 11,000 person service organization. So as we think about smart cities, we're thinking about it from the perspective of how do we deliver better service to our constituents? And that's a challenging thing to do. And I always like to think about, Winston Churchill had a quote about Americans where he said, Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted all other options. And the same is true with government and innovation. We will eventually get it right, but it's going to take us a long time. We're still going to use 1990s technology on our parking meters, thinking that it's cool and innovative, even though the rest of the world has moved on, and expects that Amazon.com type experience where you kind of go to one place, you click on what you want, you put in a credit card information, heck, it might even have your payment information already, and you click and the experience is over and you've moved on to something else. It's not something like that. So when we think about smart cities, that's where San Diego is coming from. And we've had a lot of really good successes. How many of you here are from startups? A handful of people, entrepreneurs in general? Okay, cool. So when I think about one of the things that we've done very successfully at the city of San Diego is engage the entrepreneurial community. Because I like to say that there are things that we do really well, and they're like putting out fires, catching bad guys, paving roads, pumping water. But innovation and thinking about new technology isn't something that we're necessarily that skilled at. That's not a core competency of government. So we work with early stage companies often to help us identify solutions. One of those companies, Cyberflow Analytics. Have people heard of them? Cyberflow Analytics was a local company. They were recently acquired by WebRoot. But they came to us about 24 months ago at the city of San Diego and said, in terms of helping our company grow and expand, what would be even more impactful than tax incentives would be for you to use our product and for you to rant and rave about us as we go out and do business development with other cities and large organizations. To say that we worked with the 8th largest city in America would be the most valuable thing that you could do. And so we introduced them to Gary Hayslip, who was our CISO at the time. And Gary sat down with them and said, okay, I'm willing to work with you, but you gotta help me solve a problem. I'm not gonna take your off-the-shelf solution. Here are the problems that I'm having that other vendors can't solve. And they were very willing to kind of go back and tweak and look at their product and made changes. and then deployed it on our system. And if you're not familiar, the city of San Diego, on average, we get 900 cyber attacks on a daily basis with people trying to penetrate our systems. And so we got a lot of problems to solve. And lo and behold, they did this. Fast forward 18 months, they were able to go out, sell their solution to other large companies, and they were acquired by Webroot. Or you look at another company called Piper, which is a small company here in San Diego. And they approached us and said, hey, we're already selling these little beacons to Fortune 1000 companies all over the world. And this beacon talks to your cell phone, and as you pass it or come into proximity with it, it can push out information. And they said, it would be really cool if we could deploy some of these in your city parks. So as people are running down the trail in Mission Trails Park, it'll, if you want, and you download the app, it can tell you, here's the flora and fauna and types of animals that you're interacting with. And if one of those animals happens to be a rattlesnake, it can even help you call 911 in an area of the park where there might not be good cell reception, basically piggybacking on a series of beacons back to a cell tower. So those are the types of ways that we've worked in terms of smart cities with early stage companies, where the best benefit that we were able to offer them is to say, hey, we're going to demo your technology. We've also worked with Daniel in terms of citizen engagement as well. When you think about the #1 way on smart cities to engage citizens is a hackathon. And Daniel was able to corral UCSD, City of San Diego, and a bunch of folks in the business community, the early stage tech community, around a hackathon last year on our climate action plan, where we have some bold and ambitious goals, most notably to move our community to 100% renewable energy by 2035. And Daniel asked us for a problem statement, clearly defined problem. He asked us for a lot of city data, which we were able to provide. And he asked us for a little bit of money for beer and pizza. And you take all of those things and you put a bunch of students in a room and you lock that door for 48 hours, and lo and behold, you get some good solutions to problems. So those are the kinds of solutions that we're looking for in San Diego. We've also, how many of you have heard about our streetlight deployment? Okay, got a few hands. That is actually one of the coolest things in the world of smart cities that's going on anywhere in the world, and it's happening here in San Diego. So over the next 24 months, we're going to deploy 1,500 smart streetlights throughout our community, the entire city of San Diego. And it'll be the largest deployment of smart cities technology anywhere in the world. Largest deployment of Internet of Things anywhere in an urban environment. And we're doing that, and we're taking our existing streetlights and we're upgrading them. Again, taking something that's dumb, adding a little bit of technology. And then the service component is us being able to provide better information to our residents and better services to the community. So what does that look like? When you think about the sensors that we're deploying on those streetlights, we're going to have sensors that will be able to sniff the air and identify whether or not there are any organic compounds in the air that may be because of terrorism activity or releases of chemicals because of an accident, and automatically deploy first responders to that location. They'll be able to track atmospheric conditions. So if you have asthma, you can have an app where data is being provided on a real-time basis as to 1,500 data points throughout the city as it relates to atmospheric conditions. It'll be able to hear. So it can detect gunshots and automatically deploy first responders without anyone having to call the police. Or it'll be able to see and actually look at traffic conditions on the roads and help a first responder who's trying to get to an emergency figure out what's the shortest path, not based on some model, but based on real-time conditions to move through traffic. But it'll also help you when you want to go to dinner here in Little Italy to figure out, okay, I'm coming into Little Italy, where are there actually available on-street parking spaces right now? It'll tell you that in real time. And so that's the level of service improvement that we're getting off of taking technology and bolting it onto something that is as ubiquitous as a streetlight and making it a little bit smarter. to improve services. I think another huge opportunity comes from thinking about the cell phone and the data that we all have. You know, one of the examples that I like to use when I'm talking to other city leaders, and they ask me, we've already looked through our data and there's nothing useful in there. Now, I always like to tell them the story of when I decided I wanted to count my steps. And I went to the website, downloaded the app, loaded it on my phone. And not only did it start telling me my steps for that day, but it went back 2 weeks and it told me how many steps that I had taken because that information was already on my phone. I just needed a piece of software to unlock that data, to look at it in a different way and provide that information to me. And so cities are the same way, both in terms of the city as an organization and the massive amounts of data that we collect today. And Almas Udris, who is supposed to be here, he's our performance and analytics guy. That's his entire job, is helping the city unlock those data sets and figure out how we can save money, provide better services. But then also the data that you have too. We all have accelerometers on our cell phones that are tracking those steps. Currently, I was talking to a few folks prior to this conversation, and we were talking about traffic models. And when we're trying to make decisions about where to build roads and where to invest in light rail and other types of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, we use models that were largely developed 30 and 40 years ago, that are all somebody in an ivory tower somewhere worked out a formula 30 or 40 years ago on how they think people move through urban environments. Well, now we have real-time information. We can take the data that we all have, that we're all generating, strip away our personal information, and actually see on a minute-by-minute, maybe even second-by-second basis, how people are actually moving through the city in terms of transportation flows, pedestrian flows, and then use that real information instead of a model to plan for the future. Would we create better transportation systems? Would we save money in terms of if I can take that information now and instead of doing a road assessment every 3 to 4 years to figure out which roads need to be repaired? What if I could know in real time which roads are deteriorating and how fast and how quickly they're deteriorating based on that information that comes from us right out of our pockets? So when I think about smart cities, that's what I think about. But we can't do it alone. And I think I said that, you know, there are things that cities do really well and there are things that we don't. And so when I think about innovation and the innovative ideas, it's people like you. It's the entrepreneurs, the innovators in our innovation economy that are coming up with those fantastic ideas. It's folks at the research universities and research institutions in town that are helping to cultivate those ideas and train the talent. And I think San Diego is well known for our beaches and our bays. If you go anywhere in the world and you tell somebody you're from San Diego, they usually say, oh, that's a very cool, chill, mellow place. I hung out at the beach there, or I went to the zoo. We're trying to change that dynamic. As I travel around the country and around the world talking about San Diego, I now talk about we have the world's most innovative workforce that comes out of UCSD and SDSU and the engineering talent that they're cultivating. We're the world's most innovative startup community. And it's a great place with a very strong and supportive tech ecosystem. And then you take all of those things together and we have the world's smartest city. And working in partnership, we create this brand for ourselves as being innovative, as being a hub for innovation. And ultimately, it's making the city smarter too. We're currently working with UCSD, with the city of San Diego, and with Clean Tech San Diego on what we call Metro Lab, which is a partnership where we're taking the best of breed of ideas from business communities, governments, and the academic institutions, and figuring out how to deploy them in the real world. So I promise you that I would bring it back to what do we do to fix this problem with lefties, right? How many of you are familiar with TurboTax? We've all used TurboTax, right? Or one of its competitors. And that's essentially where we started. We said, look, if TurboTax can take the federal tax code, which is what, like this tall if you printed it all out, maybe they have Intuit has a product that could do the same thing. Turns out they didn't. We asked. So I went to Almas, who runs our performance and analytics department, and I said, Almas, can you get your software engineers to build me TurboTax for city permits and regulations? And he said, yes, we could. It costs about $1 million, but I know this startup in Santa Cruz that's already developed this product and is starting to sell it to cities. And at that time, they had sold it to about 15 cities. So I called them up, and for a couple $100,000, we were able to roll out, and if I had a computer, I would show you, it's Open Counter. So if you go to business.sandiego.com, this is up and running today, where with 2 pieces of information, you tell us what business you want to engage in and where you want to do that, and it distills all of that down for you and tells you what permits you need. The next iteration of that will be letting you pay online using a credit card, and then maybe a few weeks after that, we will fully integrate it with our permitting system to give you that full Amazon experience, where for a lot of those over-the-counter permits, you'll be able to answer a few questions online, and the permit will get sent to you. That's smart cities. So I'll close it out before we have a panel discussion by saying, I guess my challenge to you as entrepreneurs and innovators and supporters of the tech ecosystem is that when you're trying to work with the city, I would encourage you to do a couple things. One is to find somebody like me. And most large cities in America have an Erik Caldwell, or they have an Almas Udris, or they have a David Graham. I like to call us entrepreneurial bureaucrats. We're thinking about government in different ways. We're willing to take some risk. It's calculated risk. It's based on lean methodology. So let's take risks, let's fail fast, let's pick up the pieces, see what we learn from it, and then go do it again. So find an entrepreneurial bureaucrat to work with, and in the city of San Diego, you found me, so you can check that off the box. The second thing is to have a conversation with us, not about the solution that you've identified, but about the problems that we have. Let's start the conversation there. Let's figure out and sit down with us and say, hey, I want to help you solve a problem. What are your top 3 problems that are bugging you? And anybody in government, especially an entrepreneurial bureaucrat like me, will sit down and have that conversation with you. And if you bring us a solution, I guarantee you we'll buy it. And then you can take it, because you're all from San Diego, and I'm the economic development director. And then you can turn that into a huge scalable business, because if the solution works for one city, chances are it'll work for 90% of the other cities that are out there. So if we can solve those problems here first, deploy them, you guys can take them, turn them into scalable businesses, and sell it to 10,000 other cities around the world. So with that, Daniel, I'll turn it back over to you for a panel discussion.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Erik. Isn't it awesome what City of San Diego is doing? Cool stuff. So now we're going to go straight into the panel, and then we're going to have the discussion. So at this point, I wanted to introduce Sarah Hermholm. So Sarah is actually advisor to Scale San Diego, but she runs 2 awesome organizations. One is called Startup Saturday, and the other one is called Whatever It Takes, or WIT. And both organizations basically work with high school students, high school kids on doing innovative projects, doing challenges. And for what we do, this is the ground of where the best ideas are coming from. And we can look what the high school students can come up with, and it kind of encourages us and it inspires us to, when we work with more seasoned entrepreneurs, to utilize some of those ideas or discover some new things. So welcome, Sarah. Oh, Sarah's also native San Diego, one of the few ones. All right, and then I'm also going to invite Wolf Bielas, who is the founder of Wolfpack Ventures, also co-founder of Downtown Works. Do you guys like the space? Great space, isn't it? And also co-founder of Scale San Diego. Welcome. And Greg Hoover, who is our CTO. And Greg is with UCSD. Teaching embedded computing and robotics and a lot of other really cool disciplines, and he's also with Intuit. All right.
Okay.
Sarah, take it away.
Thank you. I'm excited to be the moderator for this part of the evening, and we're not going to do that thing where we wait till the end to do Q&A from the audience, because I never like that when I'm in the audience because I forget the question that I wanted to ask like along the way. So I have some questions I want to ask. We have some write-in questions, but after we ask them, I ask them and they share their ideas. I'm going to open it up to the audience for follow-up questions because I really want this to be the part where you're getting a lot of value and interaction and experience with us. So you might have seen me whispering in Erik's ear while you were doing some intros, but there's a really cool thing that you hadn't mentioned that I wanted you to talk to them about, the app. That I think is one of the big things that's really cool that San Diego's doing. That's a very smart innovation. Can you share a little bit about that? And we're going to pass that mic so everybody can hear each other.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, we call it our Get It Done app.
Yes. Has anybody heard of the Get It Done app? Okay.
All right.
So everyone's going to know about this, and this is very exciting. Okay.
So the Get It Done app came out of our performance and analytics department. We call it Panda. I guess that's our nickname for the department. And it's an interesting, first of all, I'll talk about the group. And Almas Udris runs the group. Our chief data officer sits in that department. And it is largely a data analytics team and software development team inside the city of San Diego. And also a bunch of Lean Six Sigma black belts. So those are kind of the three components that are all sitting there. And so in addition to helping us be more efficient, they're constantly looking to how to deploy technology to help us increase those efficiencies and drive better services. And one of the first projects that they came up with was this Get It Done app. So it allows you, if you are out riding your bike and you hit a pothole, you can take a picture of it using the city's app, and it immediately loads it into the system, sends it over to the transportation department, creates a ticket for it, and then you will actually get contacted back, letting you know that, maybe we're going to pave that street in a month anyway, so you're not going to see any activity, or somebody's going to be out there in 24 hours to patch it. And it's any type of a problem. So if you see graffiti, if you see an abandoned car, any problem in the real world community, you can take a picture of it and load it onto the system using the app.
What I love about that, and now we all can use it, is that it makes us more engaged and also keeps people from complaining. Because everybody likes to complain about things, and it's like,
They
now
still
you can
complain.
actually, I know, they'll always complain, but at least there's an action that you can take. And so the app, how do you get that on your phone? What do you do?
You can just download it. You can
Okay.
either go to the city website or download it, or it's in the App Store.
So everyone's going to leave a little smarter and with a new tool to be using, which is good. Okay, so this question I'm opening up to everybody on the panel, and we can just pass the mic around for this one. This one is about, and you mentioned that you think that you, Erik, you know what the top problems are in the city, but I'm just curious with the people that are on the panel, like what would you consider to be the top issues that our city is facing? And to that point, do you have any interesting solutions that you've seen come across your desk, so to speak, about that? Do you want to kick it off?
Sure, I'll kick
Okay.
off. I think one of the biggest problems we're facing right now has to do with the congestion we have from lots of people coming to our city because it's such a desirable place to be. So you talk about things like transportation issues, parking. I think that's all kind of near and dear to our hearts is how do we not become the next Los Angeles? So there are a number of innovative solutions that are out there that all start with people like you that come up with new ideas, new ways to approach the problem. We're starting to see companies that are doing things like providing more informative solutions for how you get from point A to point B, things that take into consideration different routes as your options, things that maybe consider pricing as a factor in that. So changes in culture take more information, and what we can put out there to everyone in the audience that might help impact how you choose to move around the city, how you choose to be involved in the city. I think those are all great things.
Erik, do either one of you want to add on to that? Okay. I just was going to say, I liked when Erik was talking, and I think this resonated with all of us, is that you were saying, come to us to listen to what we think the biggest problems are versus like showing up with a solution. So can you speak to what, if people are going to come to you with and have that conversation, we can just have it right now.
Yeah.
The ones that are the biggest problems.
So I always start with money, and that was really the genesis of how San Diego got into smart cities. The journey for us started 15 years ago when people talked about San Diego as a place that was about to go bankrupt. It was called Enron by the Sea. Things were pretty bad. And so we got into smart cities because we were broke, not because we wanted to go out and save the world or create better services. We just wanted to keep the lights on. And so it was looking for those efficiencies in places that the private sector had been looking for a long time. And I'd say that that's still true today. To the extent that you have a tool that at the very least, if you can save government money in doing anything, that's money that we can take and then immediately invest it back into providing better services. When I think about other problems and challenges that we have, one of the big problems that we're facing right now is homelessness. And it's partially a technology problem. As it relates to, we have a lot of problems tracking homeless individuals as they move through the homeless ecosystem. So we're looking at a lot of different technology solutions on how can we put something on the smartphone of every single police officer and every single social worker so that as they're engaging people, they can add that information into a real-time database so that when that person shows up somewhere else 3 weeks from now, you can skip the first 20 minutes of the conversation because it's in the system. And you can start working on solutions on how to actually get that person off the streets. So that's a huge issue that I think is impacting a lot of people. In San Diego, we're starting to see traffic impacts. So I think this whole conversation around how do we use data and technology to create better infrastructure, the infrastructure of the future that's going to better move people through the community. As that relates to our climate action plan, one of the things that we're starting to do is to look at the carbon footprint, not just times for moving through the city, but what's the energy intensity and the carbon footprint associated with different transportation schemes. And then I would say another big problem for the city right now is housing affordability. And I can think of a lot of different ways in terms of how technology could be better leveraged. A lot of that is on the planning front. Again, how do we better use data to figure out how we can create the densities that we need in the right places to start to address that issue? I think if you ask me for the big three as it stands today, those would probably be the big three.
What's interesting about that is that the two that go hand in hand to a certain point, the affordable housing and the homelessness, because you do have an issue with homeless that is, some of them are because they can't find affordable housing. So if you can hack that, you're actually impacting that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this and follow up what Erik just said as we're talking about the opportunities for innovation in the city. As Erik was talking about the data and making data more usable, how many of you guys are aware of OpenGov?
I guess like 3 or 4 hands, 5
All right.
hands.
Okay. So after this event, you might want to go and check them out. So it's a very cool company that came out of Stanford, and they actually participate in one of those like city challenges in Palo Alto. It was a student project essentially that targeted itself. They started looking at the city financial data and saying, okay, how can we come up with an application that will make the city financial data more transparent. And I think they maybe won the challenge or they were one of the runner-up, but when they started kind of trialing this, but that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was actually making the financial data transparent across the city itself so that the different departments could share the financial data, kind of unification. And that took them on a completely different level. So today they're in 1,000 cities, and the city of San Diego is one of their customers, right? And they're funded by Andreessen Horowitz and doing very well. But this is, to me, is a great example. So these people just went and tackled one specific problem with financial data. But there's a gazillion of problems like this, and how do you make data more usable, no matter where you look, whether it's like permissions or whether it's on areas, and there's still a lot of issues dealing with open data because it has different format, it's sometimes siloed, it doesn't have metadata, and so on and so on and so on. So from that standpoint, I think this is a huge opportunity.
Okay, so since I did say I was going to open it up to the audience, I want to open it up to any questions that you might have based on the topics that we've been discussing. You can just raise your hand and, yeah, okay, use a button. Go ahead.
So we're talking about technology and ways to, we talk about money, right, to save money and kind of communicate across the board and use analytics. We're managing a program for San Diego Gas and Electric on Harder Drive. It's in, yeah, exactly. It's a EV vehicle charging program. So our company has the program management contract. And the amount of inefficiencies that we see when we're dealing with such programs, are tremendous. So what we see is scale it back to the micro scale, we brought a UAV program to SDG&E. And with the UAV program, we had LiDAR, we had photogrammetry, we got rid of all the surveying costs, reduced the cost of acquiring data by about 75%. Now, the problem was that each department was competing with one another. So I want to bring the solution to SDG&E, so it was really hard for it to take off. So we had to use a cognitive science approach to kind of hack everybody into seeing this value so that everybody felt like they were a winner. And it was exhausting, but it's possible, right? Because technology is also allowing us to understand neuroscience and how to hack people. So on a macro scale, this would save a ton of money. There's something there that's huge. So I'm going to communicate that and say, well, what are your thoughts about looking at something like that kind of model?
Yeah, I would say that.
First of all, just a moment. Did everybody hear what the question was? That's what I was a little concerned of. So, and I'm not sure I was super clear on what it was, but I want to make sure our friends in the back understand it. So, do you want to? You look like you know what's up. So I'll let, but make sure that the people in the back know because they couldn't hear him.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase it. Yeah. But essentially, he's asking the question of working with principally government institutions and utilities. Why every time you're going through a procurement, you're selling services or entering into a contract, do you have to reinvent the wheel with each jurisdiction? And he's working with the Power Your Drive program, which is an EV charging infrastructure rollout of 3,500 charging stations around the region. It's actually going to be the largest deployment, I think, anywhere on the West Coast. But it's a valid question as it relates to the procurement piece. And it's something that I know a lot of more innovative cities are starting to try to tackle because it's exactly true. I mean, when we were going through this open counter, we were the 30th city in the United States to adopt this program. And the 29 cities that adopted it before us all went through the same, let's go out and write an RFP, let's put it out on the street, even though the vendor has told us, and a simple Google search will tell you nobody else can do this. It's got to sit out for 90 days. There are a lot of rules that are designed to keep me from giving all of our hard-earned taxpayer money to my friends and family. And that's essentially what they're designed to do, is to make it difficult for me to enter into contracts so that there's a lot of visibility on it. But that impedes innovation. So actually, we're working with our purchasing and contracting director, and actually through an organization called Metro Lab, which is again, universities, cities, and business communities which is here in San Diego, and we're now partnered up with about 18 other regions around the country. And this is one of the first conversations that we had. How do I do something here, and then I can just pass it off to 18 other municipalities and they can go for it. And it's a work in progress. I think the biggest couple ways that we've been able to get around that, especially with early stage companies, is to do things on a pilot basis. So pilot projects. It was very similar to what we did with Cyberflow Analytics, where they came in, it didn't cost us anything, it was kind of informal. If we were going to enter into a contract later on, we would have to go out and do a procurement. But in this innovation space, if you're the first to get there, and you are the first to tailor technology to a city use, even if you go out and you do a quick RFP and you only have it out for 30 days, you're going to win. So, I wouldn't shy away from having those conversations about pilot projects, and then also look for, especially a lot of the larger cities tend to be the more innovative ones as it relates to how do we adopt alternative procurement mechanisms so that we can get to that innovation. Cities are hungry for it, and a lot of the larger cities are trying to figure out how do we create an alternative process to get there.
Is there another question from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tristan. I founded the Machine Learning Society and actually holding a hackathon on artificial intelligence and machine learning next month on the 23rd to the 25th at Scale Matrix. The question is, what is San Diego's stake in artificial intelligence? My personal belief is that San Diego can become a global center for AI, and in fact, we're attracting a lot of the people from beyond the wall. So I think it's pretty interesting that there's quite an opportunity. The cities are being chosen right now for the future of the future economies. San Diego certainly has an opportunity to become one of them on the Silicon Road. What is San Diego's position in that, and what kind of support should the artificial intelligence community expect to receive from the city and from industry and from academia and military?
Did you catch that in the back about AI? Okay, good.
question. I can speak not specifically to the AI component, but I can say that there are related fields like robotics, where UC San Diego is positioning themselves as the next greatest spot for robotics. UCSD works across a number of fields, including AI. So while I can't speak because I'm not specifically in AI department, I can say that at large we look for these areas and do want to be on the front lines of innovation across all of these spaces. I don't think you can say that there are any other cities that have the kind of engineering focus in so many different fields that we have here and the same types of resources that are available to us. I can't speak to the city portion. So.
Just one thing that I wanted to add. So we have amazing assets in San Diego for sure. So we have Brain Corporation, right? How many of you are aware of Brain Corporation? We have Qualcomm that has quite a few efforts in artificial intelligence, data analytics on their chips and kind of positioning towards drones, for example, is one of the applications. We also have some great brains in town. We have Stephen Dow, who's here, right? Stephen, at least he was here. And we also have Brad Wojtek in cognitive sciences and UCSD. And Brad was one of the first people with Uber, and then he decided to choose the academic career instead of staying with Uber, and now he's teaching in San Diego, cognitive science. I mean, his class on data science and artificial intelligence that he started had like 15 people first year and then 200 people second year. So yes, we definitely have amazing assets in town for artificial intelligence. You want to add anything?
Yeah, just in speaking to the importance of this to the city, it's hugely important, but we haven't begun to even figure this issue out. I think in my talk before the panel, I talked about the massive amounts of data that we collect, and we know that there's something there, but we lack the skill sets to unlock it. So I think we're really relying on the private sector and academic and research institutions to come to the table and help us figure out how we can have those conversations. I would say our biggest concern thus far going forward with a lot of this has been the privacy issue. You know, the water department is one of the biggest creators of data in the city of San Diego, and you know, you can tell a lot about what somebody's doing at their house or their place of business by how much water they're using and when they're using it. So how can we put that data into play and really apply analytics and artificial intelligence to it to drive some better decisions and better service provision, but doing it in a way that protects, in this case, ratepayer privacy is huge.
A follow-up question for your hackathon, who is it open to?
So it's actually open to general population. Every 2 weeks on Saturday, we hold a mini hackathon, a Kaggle competition. I started this about maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and we are now ranked around 6th to 7th place in the global YouTube image classification challenge for videos. And our team, we just secured a sponsorship from the Open Power Foundation, which IBM is part of, to give us hardware, which we're planting in the San Diego Supercomputer Center, which is going to give us advanced computational powers in order for us to win first place. And based on our success here, we recently launched our New York chapter and our Boston chapter, and soon we're gearing up to do our San Francisco chapter. And everyone is interested in why San Diego, why it's Spark in San Diego. And I have a couple of answers for that. There's a collaborative community here. I came here and I saw that people wanted to work together, wanted to help me, wanted to educate me. And when I told them of this idea, they supported me. So I've received support from everyone in the community because they believe in this vision. And I'm very grateful. And I think this is extremely unique to San Diego. I came here from New York 9 months ago. I wanted to stay I wanted to go to San Francisco. I didn't because I realized that this is the best place in the world, and I champion it every single day. I tell everyone.
Yes, I think we agree with that. I have a couple questions that I want to ask, and then I'm going to bounce it back to the audience. One is to this point, when you had asked if there were some startups in the audience, I saw some hands go up. So I have a question for you, and then I'm going to jump it over to Wolf for this part too. I'm wondering, how does a startup get in front of the government? I mean, is it as simple as just knowing you? I mean, you did say, like, now that we know you, then we can... Is it that simple? Because we want to know.
And unfortunately, yes, that is the best avenue for a startup to get in front of government, because usually government is going to send out an RFP or an RFQ, and as a startup, you, at least with the larger cities, you won't even make the qualification list. You know, we ask for crazy things from most of the companies. You know, we want you to have $1 million in liability insurance, give us indemnification for anything that could possibly, if an asteroid hits the Earth and you're doing business with us, you're going to hold us harmless. But those are kind of the crazy provisions that a lot of larger companies are like, yeah, okay, it's fine to do business with the city of San Diego, we'll do it. So having conversations with me is really the principal mechanism, and there's others at the cities too, again, that are kind of fit that same mold as I do, where we can have conversations and we can work with you and we can figure out how to get something up and rolling if you're helping us solve one of our problems.
And then to Wolf, you can pass the mic down to him. I know this event is also about scale and and what we're doing at scale with the Accelerator program. So if there are people in the audience, and I'm sensing that there are some that actually like have ideas. So before they get in front of our friend Erik here, can you speak a little bit about what we're doing at scale with the Accelerator and with ideas and things like that?
So I'll answer that, but
Okay.
I want to add, we're in a very, very, very lucky place. And being in San Diego, and I'll give you a background before I did it, Downtown Works and Wolfpack. If you guys use any of the toll roads, my company used to provide all that technology. And it was very, very interesting because we basically, everything west of Colorado, it was our technology. And dealing with the government and dealing with the state, I still remember, I sold my company 7 years ago, and I still remember going with the newest technology that we developed in San Diego, that instead of the box, it was a sticker, and going with Caltrans and say, oh, we need to test the technology for 5 years before we even consider using the technology. And it was very interesting because Washington State, I think first it was Colorado, and then Washington State went and said, we'll try it. And WashDOT, it's using the technology, and they say, we need to try it. I say, we have deployment millions of vehicles in Brazil, Argentina, and in California. They're still, believe it or not, I just find out they're still testing on the technology. And I have seen from the perspective also from real estate and dealing with other cities, how different an entrepreneurship is the city of San Diego. And I have run experiments from going with my plans and run a set of plans to the city and walking with my permit. That when I told that my partners that I was able to do that and not being able to do it on a city that maybe it's 5 miles from here, it really talks about some of the changes that the city is doing. So first, we're lucky not just because the weather, but especially when we're doing all this urban innovation, and that's why that goes into the answering your question. It's that's why we pick urban innovation, and it's not just that we are in downtown and we're like we can throw a stone to his office. It's like how cooperative and how easy it's to get a meeting into the city, to do the experience of the hackathon and get this city into doing this. And not trying to pick on other cities, Downtown Works, that it's built a year ago, I came with another city where I used to live in that city. I used to have my business in that city and go and say, I want to do an incubator, I want to do an accelerator. And they didn't get, it was about the real estate. They didn't understood about doing the community and what we were trying to do. So we are in a very, very lucky place. And that's why also we picked to do this accelerator specifically on urban innovation. It's because having the cooperation of the city, we think that we can create a very strong ecosystem to be able to test, deploy, and using San Diego, it's a big city, and we can deploy and have the cooperation of the city to go and bring these ideas and have somebody that will hear on the other side and help. It's a win-win. It's a win-win for the startups, but it's also a win-win for the city.
Yeah, so those in the audience that have ideas for urban innovation, Scale is the place to be applying for that, which you can do later on this evening if you'd like, or tomorrow online. I'm going to bounce it out to the audience again. So if we have a few minutes left in the Q&A. Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll do you in the front. Go.
So we've heard about there's great hackathons happening, which is fantastic. How is the city reaching out beyond and looking at other cities that have been successful in other cities in terms of innovation, and then bringing those learnings back here and disseminating those learnings and those potential solutions among people trying to develop new solutions so that we're not repeating.
So it sounds, this would be more directed towards Eric, the question being, around, or I guess to general, like how are we learning from other cities and coming back and then incorporating the lessons that we've learned from the other cities right here in San Diego? And about what we're, okay, do you want to kick that off first?
Yeah, the first part of the question, I think through MetroLab and other kind of peer-to-peer exchanges, and there's a multitude of them that we're involved in, where there's cohorts of cities, a dozen or more, that are having those conversations and sharing ideas. We're also having conversations with Cleantech San Diego, which does a lot in the smart city space here in San Diego. And they've really driven a conversation of saying, how can we take what the city of San Diego is doing and cities like Chula Vista, which is also on the cutting edge of smart city technology, in the port of San Diego, and get other cities like Escondido and Vista and San Marcos to adopt some of that technology as well. The latter part of your question, in the sense of how are we talking about this to citizens, we've done a really poor job at that piece of it, of how do we communicate the value proposition in terms of what you're getting from the investments in smart cities. And that's something that we're trying to get better at, of actually going out to community groups, getting media coverage, getting people to actually realize these are the great things that are happening. I think this is one of the problems with smart city technology is, again, government is a light year behind where the rest of your consumer experience is. If you think about government as a service industry, what we're providing is essentially what people expect. So, just like I don't get an award for feeding my son, I don't think anybody's giving government a pat on the back for applying the latest innovation to service delivery, because everybody else does.
Yeah, I would also say that the work that I do, because I'm in San Diego, St. Louis, Austin, and New York, and we do hackathons there, and we're helping these teens in those cities too. We are trying to learn from what's happening in Austin, how they're dealing with homelessness, or the gentrification that's happening in Austin, or like in New York, what they're doing there, and seeing if we can apply those same solutions here, or at least educating our teens when they come to the table with an idea. We can say, I have to say kudos to the city, because when we have hackathons here, city officials show up on a Saturday, and Wolf was actually there too, like hearing these ideas, and a lot of kids lead with their hearts more than adults do. And their solutions, and we have to push back on those and go, actually, that's not helping, that's sustaining homelessness, that's perpetuating the problem. So here are some ideas that we're seeing in different cities that are working, and steering them in that direction, because we want them to work smarter, not harder. And I think, I'm obviously in the teen space and the youth space, I think the advocacy and engaging the youth is a really great way to get the message out, because they're the ones that spread it on social media. They're the ones that we have taught that street feeding is an issue, and now they never even knew that was an issue, and they're going home to their parents and saying that. So sometimes it's a grassroots effort in the work that I do, but I will say that the city showing up to our events is really helpful, because they are educating, and in our different cities, we are learning what they're doing and trying to apply it here. But I like I said, I play with the youth teen space, so that's where we're doing that. Yes, did you want to add to that?
So I think it's important that you stay involved with your local community and with organizations like Scale, because we're not just looking at San Diego, we're looking at cities around the world, and we're reaching out to them so that we can learn from what they've done, both in how they've helped accelerate companies that have been innovative, and also in the learnings they've gathered from their local cities. So just being here tonight, being at places like Scale, I think is a step in the right direction.
And then you had your hand up, yeah.
Basically piggybacking on the same question, but more in a different way, where we're all like startups and private companies, and then Eric is a representative of the local government or somebody like Eric to actually spread the word internally. So my question is, what can the private sector do for the, public in trying to connect you with others? Because I don't know if you have like full access to all the other agencies, but can the private and the public work together? So maybe you don't have access to SDG&E, but as a company that works as a consulting SDG&E, we're actually more inside their offices, and how to cross all that together.
So the question is around the private and the public coming together.
Yeah, like scale from what I understand is, I'm first time here, so excuse me if I'm going to misrepresent, but you're almost like filtering or looking at the ideas from the private sector and then having that communication with the public and bridging that gap. But it's more of a question and a suggestion as well, is how can you reach out more to those specific companies, or I know we have ideas on how to get cities and agencies, multiple. Then utility is also someone that is in between public and private, and it's a little bit crossover between all of them to help bridge those gaps, because there are internal challenges.
Okay, so the communication, do you want to take that, Eric?
Yeah, and if you've got some great ideas, I'd love to learn more about those ideas, because it is a challenge. I would say, as it relates to other government entities and utilities and a lot of the larger players, at least the city of San Diego, we're well connected to them. But even with those connections, I think sometimes things get lost in translation, and there's just those internal barriers. And a good example of that is when the city of San Diego rolled out its smart meter deployment, we used Itron technology, and the SDG&E literally like 3 months later rolled out their smart meter deployment using Itron technology, but the next iteration of it, and the two systems can't talk to each other. So they're sitting right
Wonderful.
next to each other at your house, but they can't talk to each other.
I bring that up because it happens within SDG&E itself. So Power Drive is an outside program, but SDG&E within its campus has charging stations, and they're not the same.
Yep.
So to actually see that is like mind-boggling.
So it's something that we're trying to work on by just getting together and having more engagement amongst each other to say, this is what we're working on, let's work together. Even in a city as innovative as the city of San Diego, we find it with departments. We had a department recently that rolled out technology that was identical to what we're putting on the streetlights. And it was like, well, wait a minute, if you would have asked us, we already did it. So
Communication.
it's communication, but to the extent that you can help with ideas on how to facilitate better communication, I'm all ears.
We work for you, Eric, of SDG&E, so if we were to connect that, Eric, with you, Eric, then
Perfect.
together we'd already cross the gaps that, solve those problems.
Okay, so we're going to end with my question, and we'll start at the end of the couch and move down this way. So you have this captivated audience, and you've got people that want to get engaged and get involved. What would be, and we're all here from different sectors with different missions. So what would be your call to action to the people in the room tonight?
So I think Eric brought up a great point earlier, which is that the city has a lot of data. There's a lot of data, public and private, and we're all looking for ways to use it, new innovative solutions to problems that we face every day. I think my call to action would be aware of your surroundings every day and look at how you could improve the life of yourself and the life of the people around you. And then see, is there something that we already have, or is there something we don't yet have that we need in order to enable those solutions?
What I will say, it's a lot of the problem, it's in some sense coordination and having that. So it's one of the things that we're doing at scale. It's to really try to not just filter, to bring companies, to bring those technologies, to try to expose it. And I understand the frustration. On one hand does one thing and the other, and there is different to solve. But I will say getting involved with our community, getting involved with scale, because we're going to try to filter and we're going to try to help to get these ideas and these problems and try to implement it. We have the cooperation that we have with the city. It's really, really unique. And I think all this can be solved having these meetings We have never had any problem when we invite somebody from the city to participate, to then follow up. So we're in a very good space. I will say participate, come to the events, and help scale to be able to grow.
I'd like to add to that and say, there are like existing problems and known problems, and there are problems that not yet quite known, anticipated problems. That were usually where most innovation kind of ends up coming from. And so definitely for us, very important to work closely with the city and understand city's problems and help drive innovation. But if that's the only way, if that's the only thing we will rely on, it would be similar to like driving forward, looking at the rear view mirror, because those are already kind of known things, right? So we're definitely looking beyond that and looking at the new services that might not exist. And basically, following up what my partners just said, is that how can you utilize the data? What kind of new services can you come up with that you haven't thought about? So that's a big part of the labs part of the scale, right? And so on this, I just wanted to say, first of all, if you have great ideas, if you already have a startup or you have great ideas, apply to scale. Apply to participate in scale. Do we have the website up, by the way? Yeah, we have the new website up today just for this event. So you can go and apply. It's ready to go. Yeah, so you can apply. And if you qualify to join Scale, great. And if you don't, but you still have a great idea, there's opportunity to participate in the labs where some of those new ideas being incubated and with technology tools and so on. So please take a look, and we hope to see you more often. The website is scalesd.com or .io, whichever you prefer. It's pretty easy.
Okay, Eric, what's your call to action to the citizens?
So 2 things. One, I'm going to try not to be negative, but
Yes, let's end on a positive
yeah,
note.
I'm going to save the positive for the very last. But I would say to all of the companies and entrepreneurs that are thinking about making a government offering as the core of your business plan, you might want to rethink that and diversify a little bit. Because often, if you're waiting on government as your first contract, you can get that contract executed, but you will run out of cash waiting for us to make that first payment. So if you can diversify away from just a pure government offering and leverage your technology with somebody else, another market segment that pays faster, that is probably a good thing. So I always like to leave that advice with early stage companies. The second thing, and this is ending on a huge positive note, but is just that the landscape in the sense of cities is transforming in a very positive way. So all of the things that you guys are working on and the great ideas that you have, this is the future of government. In San Diego and a couple other cities in our region are at the forefront of that, but when you think about economic development, community development, the provision of government services, looking for additional efficiencies, it's all coming back to smart cities. And how do we leverage technology and data in more efficient and more creative ways? So if you've got great ideas, there's a huge, huge market opportunity here. And a lot of other cities, east of here and to the south in Mexico that are hungry for those solutions and ideas.
Great. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists? I'm maybe slightly biased because I office here at Downtown Works. But it's one of our reasons that we're able to be here tonight is our partner Scale's partnership with Downtown Works, this beautiful space that you're in. And I know we have some startups in the house tonight, and so we have a tour that's going to happen within 5 minutes at the DW front desk. So if you're looking for even desk space, office space, this is a great place to do it. I launched another company while I was here. There must be something in the air, but it's a collaborative environment, and it's a great place to be. So we're grateful to have DW as part of Scale. We also have some really cool people here demoing tonight, and we weren't able to hear our wonderful Mr. Einstein. You might have seen Einstein around earlier because we had the music on, so we're going to hold off on the music for about 10, 15 minutes so that we can, those of you that are interested in understanding what is this Einstein doing over there, you can actually go listen and hear. So please make sure to visit the demo tables and to engage with one another, because there's a lot of people in the room tonight that you can learn from, collaborate with. So please stick around, enjoy some dessert, wine, coffee, and make sure to check your inboxes tomorrow, because we're going to be sending out some information about our next event and some stuff for all of you here tonight. So thank you for being here. Enjoyed having you.